Most people don't think of Denmark as a military problem for Russia. It's small, it doesn't posture, it doesn't threaten. And that is exactly why Russia is paying attention. Because Denmark isn't trying to overpower Russia. It's doing something far more dangerous. It's removing Russia's room to maneuver. Russia does not lose influence when it meets a stronger opponent head-on. It loses influence when the environment stops behaving the way it expects, when pressure no longer accumulates, when escalation no longer stays controllable, when movement becomes visible too early. By 2026, Denmark is quietly becoming one of the countries that causes that kind of disruption. Not with a single superweapon, not with dramatic mobilization, but by turning geography, readiness, and alliance integration into something Russia cannot bypass. The Baltic Sea used to be a space where Russia could apply pressure cheaply. Naval patrols, air activity, hybrid actions below the threshold of war. Signals meant to remind smaller states who still had reach. That model depended on one assumption: that the Baltic remained porous, that access could not be fully denied, that escalation could be shaped slowly. Denmark is breaking that assumption because Denmark does not sit beside the Baltic. It sits on the exits. Every Russian naval movement between the Baltic Sea and the wider Atlantic has to pass through narrow straits and approaches Denmark monitors closely, works with allies to track, and increasingly prepares to contest in a crisis. That fact alone turns Denmark into something Russia cannot ignore, and this is where the shift toward 2026 matters. Denmark has moved from symbolic deterrence to functional readiness. Defense spending has accelerated sharply. Maritime surveillance is expanding. Undersea infrastructure protection has become a priority. And most importantly, Danish forces are no longer designed to surge temporarily in a crisis. They are designed to already be there. Russia's pressure strategies depend on delay. Delay between detection and response. Delay between movement and coordination. Delay between escalation and consequence. Denmark is helping remove those delays. A Russian naval probe in the Baltic no longer tests just one country's reaction. It touches NATO planning faster than Russia prefers. A hybrid incident involving cables or shipping lanes does not sit in ambiguity for long. It can trigger investigation, sharing, and coordinated response sooner than Moscow wants. This is the part Moscow did not plan for. Denmark is not preparing to fight Russia alone. It is preparing to make any Russian move a shared problem from the start. And once pressure stops being local, it stops being efficient. Russia can still deploy ships. It can still fly aircraft. It can still signal, but by 2026, every signal can carry a cost that used to arrive later or not at all. That cost is the real threat. Because when the background environment becomes hostile to gradual escalation, Russia is forced into a choice it hates: escalate faster than planned or slow down and lose momentum. Denmark's military trajectory toward 2026 forces that dilemma quietly, consistently, and without needing headlines. If you want clear, no hype breakdowns of how military power is actually shifting in Europe, subscribe. Now let's look at the part of Denmark's posture Russia is most sensitive to: the sea. If Russia has one persistent vulnerability in Europe, it is access, not territory, not manpower, access. The Baltic Sea is where that vulnerability concentrates. On paper, the Baltic looks crowded. Multiple coastlines, short distances, heavy civilian traffic, plenty of room to hide activity and noise. In reality, it is one of the most constrainable bodies of water on the planet. And Denmark sits at the point where those constraints become brutally real. Every Russian surface ship that wants to leave the Baltic and reach the North Sea has to pass through narrow Danish straits. Every submarine has to assume it could be detected or tracked during that transit, long before it reaches open water. Every naval movement becomes more predictable not because of weakness, but because geography allows very few options. For years, Russia relied on that predictability working in its favor. Limited NATO presence, fragmented regional responses, naval patrols that signaled but rarely interfered, a belief that the Baltic could be pressured without triggering full alliance attention. That environment is gone. By 2026, Denmark's naval role is no longer just about presence. It is about denial. Here is the key shift. Denmark is not trying to win a sea battle on camera. It is trying to make Russia feel boxed in before the crisis even has a name. And once you see what that does to Russia's options, the rest of the Baltic strategy starts collapsing in real time. Denmark has reshaped its maritime posture around one central idea. If Russia cannot move freely, it cannot pressure freely. This is not about chasing Russian ships. It is about making every Russian movement visible, trackable, and strategically expensive. Denmark's navy is optimized for shallow waters, choke points, and constant surveillance. Its surface vessels are designed to operate where maneuver is limited and mistakes are costly. Its sensors focus on detecting movement early rather than responding late. And its cooperation with neighboring states turns local awareness into regional certainty. This is where Russia's problem deepens. The Baltic is no longer a collection of national zones. It is increasingly becoming a shared operational picture. A Danish radar track does not stay Danish. A maritime anomaly does not stay local. A suspected undersea incident does not wait comfortably for slow confirmation cycles. By 2026, Denmark is embedded deeply enough into alliance maritime planning that response can begin before Russia can fully decide whether it wants escalation or restraint. And that timing matters more than firepower. Russia's naval signaling has always relied on ambiguity. Ships appear, aircraft approach, exercises expand and contract. Pressure builds slowly while reactions lag. Denmark shortens that lag. When a Russian vessel enters sensitive waters, it can be identified early. When patterns repeat, they can be recognized faster. When something deviates, it can stand out immediately. This pushes Russian commanders toward conservative behavior. Routes get adjusted. Deployment shortened. Signals become less frequent and less effective, not because Denmark is threatening violence, but because Denmark removes uncertainty for everyone except Russia. There is also a second layer Moscow cannot ignore. The Baltic Sea is not just military space. It is economic space, energy routes, data cables, commercial shipping lanes, critical infrastructure that Europe cannot afford to lose. Denmark has positioned itself as one of the key protectors of that infrastructure. By 2026, undersea monitoring and maritime security are treated more like core defense missions, not side tasks. This matters because hybrid pressure depends on deniability, cable damage, shipping disruption, unexplained incidents. Those only work when attribution is slow. Denmark and its partners are working to shrink that delay. When incidents are detected earlier, investigated faster, and shared quickly, Russia loses the gray zone it prefers to operate in. And once the gray zone shrinks, pressure becomes riskier. This is why Denmark's naval role punches far above its size. It does not seek confrontation. It seeks closure. Closure of routes, closure of ambiguity, closure of the slow phase Russia relies on to test boundaries without consequence. By 2026, the Baltic Sea is no longer a space where Russia can apply pressure cheaply. It is a space where every move is noticed, contextualized, and planned against. And that changes everything. Because when the sea stops behaving like a buffer, it becomes a constraint. And constraints are exactly what Russia's pressure strategies cannot tolerate. If the Baltic Sea is where Russia's freedom of movement gets constrained, the air above it is where Russia's timeline starts to collapse. Russia's pressure strategy does not begin with ships or troops. It begins with uncertainty, unidentified aircraft, electronic probing, ambiguous airspace activity, signals meant to test reactions without forcing decisions. That only works when detection is slow and responses are fragmented. Denmark is helping remove both. By 2026, Denmark's air posture is no longer designed around national defense alone. It is built as part of a layered surveillance and response system stretching across northern Europe. Fighter aircraft, ground-based radar, maritime sensors, and allied intelligence feeds are fused into a more continuous operational picture rather than an episodic one. That matters because Russia does not fear interception. It fears compression. When detection happens earlier, the decision window shrinks. When information is shared faster, coordination accelerates. And when coordination accelerates, escalation becomes harder to manage. Denmark's geography makes this especially damaging. The country sits at the seam between the Baltic and the North Sea, between continental Europe and the Nordic airspace. Anything that moves through this corridor can be seen by multiple sensors quickly. By 2026, Denmark's participation in joint Nordic and NATO air defense frameworks means Russian aircraft cannot probe one sector without being tracked across several. There is no isolated test anymore. A Russian aircraft approaching Baltic airspace is not just a local event, it becomes part of a wider pattern that planners can analyze in real time. That removes Russia's favorite advantage. Russia prefers to escalate in increments small enough to stay below political thresholds. Airspace probing only works when it feels temporary and reversible. Denmark's posture makes every probe cumulative. Patterns are logged. Frequency is measured, routes are mapped. Intent becomes clearer faster, and once intent becomes clearer, escalation loses flexibility. This forces Russia into a dilemma. If it reduces air activity, it loses pressure and visibility. If it maintains activity, it accelerates alliance readiness. Neither option is attractive. By 2026, Denmark's air force is also operating as part of a much tighter Nordic cluster. Sweden and Finland's integration into NATO changes how airspace is managed in the region. Air defense no longer stops at borders. Coverage overlaps. Response plans interlock. That creates a more continuous defensive environment Russia cannot easily bypass. Russia can still fly, it can still probe, but every flight can carry more political and operational weight than before. This changes the psychological balance. Russian planners no longer ask whether a move will be noticed. They assume it will. The question becomes how quickly it will trigger follow-on responses. That uncertainty feeds upward. When air pressure feels brittle, naval signaling becomes cautious. When naval signaling weakens, hybrid tactics lose cover. When all of that slows down, Russia's pressure cycle breaks. This is where Denmark's role becomes quietly decisive. It does not need to dominate Russian air power. It only needs to make Russian timing unreliable. By 2026, Denmark helps ensure that Russia can no longer count on slow detection, fragmented response, or delayed coordination. And once those assumptions disappear, Russia loses its most valuable asset: control over when escalation begins. Because when escalation starts before Russia's ready for it, pressure stops being a tool. It becomes a risk. At this point, Russia's problem with Denmark stops being regional. It becomes systemic, because Denmark's most dangerous role in 2026 is not just what it does in the Baltic or the airspace above it, it's what Denmark influences far beyond it: Greenland and space. And this is where Denmark stops being a Baltic country and starts becoming a strategic problem Russia cannot compartmentalize. Russia's northern strategy depends on one critical assumption: that activity in the Arctic can be compartmentalized. Naval movements here, air patrols there, missile forces protected by distance, ice, and delay. Greenland disrupts that illusion. Denmark's sovereignty over Greenland places it directly astride routes Russia's most sensitive forces rely on: ballistic missile submarines leaving the Kola Peninsula, long-range aviation transiting polar corridors, missile trajectories that arc over the Arctic toward North America. None of this is theoretical. Western defense assessments often describe the Arctic as a major avenue for Russian strategic forces. By 2026, Denmark's role in Greenland makes it harder for Russia to treat that space as neutral or distant. Surveillance does not start at the Baltic anymore. It starts deep in the Arctic. Early warning radar, space-based tracking, maritime domain awareness tied into allied command structures. Denmark does not operate this alone. That is the point. Its value comes from integration. Greenland hosts infrastructure that contributes to US and allied early warning systems, missile detection, space situational awareness. Tracking that can shorten decision timelines dramatically. Russia does not fear these systems because they can stop everything. It fears them because they remove ambiguity. When launches are detected earlier, escalation windows shrink. When trajectories are clearer, miscalculation becomes harder to hide behind. When attribution is faster, deniability collapses. This directly affects Russia's deterrence posture. Russian strategy relies on controlled ambiguity, on the ability to signal without fully committing, on the belief that escalation can be managed step by step. Greenland makes that ladder steeper. By 2026, Denmark's investments in Arctic and space coordination mean Russia's most sensitive assets operate under a harsher observation environment, not constant tracking, constant possibility. And that distinction matters. Russia does not need to believe it is watched all the time. It only needs to believe it might be watched often enough to change behavior. That belief bleeds downward. When strategic forces feel exposed, conventional forces become cautious. When caution spreads, pressure campaigns slow. When pressure slows, momentum dies. This is how Denmark becomes more than a regional actor. It becomes a timing disruptor across domains: Baltic access, airspace control, Arctic surveillance, space-based early warning, all feeding into the same consequence for Moscow. More moves are detected earlier, more signals are interpreted faster, more escalation paths carry higher risk than before, and Russia cannot isolate any of it. Because challenging Denmark and Greenland is not a bilateral issue. It touches US forces, NATO command, alliance nuclear signaling. Russia avoids those intersections whenever possible. That avoidance is the leverage. Denmark does not threaten Russia with force. It threatens Russia with inevitability. Whatever Russia does next is more likely to be seen sooner, shared wider, and responded to faster than Moscow prefers. And that is the exact opposite of how Russia wants to operate.